Good morning. Good morning. I'm Annette Whatcom. I'm co-president of the League of Women Voters, and I welcome all of you here today. It's great to see you. Would you please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. The voter forums are presented by the League of Women Voters of Bellingham, Whatcom County, and the City of Bellingham. The city has provided the facilities, and the forum is being televised live by BTV 10. This forum will be presented on BTV 10, on the city's website, and on low-powered radio stations KMRE and KAVZ. The Bellingham Herald is our media partner, and we thank all of our partners in making this event happen. The forums are the property of the League of Women Voters of Bellingham, Whatcom County, and the City of Bellingham, and they may not be used in any manner without specific written permission from both parties. At this time, I'd like to remind you to turn off your cell phones. A bit about the League. Founded in 1920, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization with 800 affiliates across the country. The League encourages informed and active participation in government. It works to increase the understanding of major public policy issues and influences public policy through advocacy and education. We do not support or oppose candidates or political parties. We welcome men and women of all ages to join the League. We have membership brochures, looking like this, available in the table outside, and we will be happy to answer any questions that you have about the League and our activities. I'm pleased to see so many of you here today and invite your participation in the program. You may submit your written questions for the candidates and the ballot initiative spokesman here today. Please write your questions clearly on the 3x5 cards and use ink, one question per card. It would also be helpful to put at the top Initiative 594 or PUD candidates or 1351 so that we can keep it straight. Just raise your hand if you need an additional card from our ushers. They will come to you during the program and give you that material. When you have a question, you can pass it into the aisle. They'll bring it up here to the League volunteers who are reviewing the questions. They will be screened for legibility and duplication by members of the League who are seated here. And it is our intent to respond to as many of your questions as time permits. So today we will be meeting candidates for the PUD Commission, the Public Utility Commission, and discussing two ballot initiatives. Initiative 1351 about reducing classroom size, and Initiative 594 concerning background checks for firearm sales and transfers. But first, we would like to share some information about the Charter Review Commission. This is another item that will be on our ballot. As League members conducting voter registration events throughout the county, we have heard voters are puzzled by one of the choices on their ballots, electing members to the Whatcom County Charter Review Commission. Well, this isn't surprising since we only do this about once in every 10 years. So we have invited League member Judith Wiseman up here in front to help us answer some of the questions we've been hearing. Judith served on the first Charter Review Commission in 1985. She was in high school then, I think.
Thank you, Annette.
The questions we most often hear are, what is the Charter Review Commission? What's the charter? So what is the Charter Review Commission?
Before we answer that, we need to answer some other questions before. And the first is...
Okay. What is the charter?
This is what the current charter looks like. A little background. Just after World War II, the state legislature amended the constitution of the state to allow counties of a certain size to establish home rule and to adopt a charter form of government. King County was the first to adopt home rule and a charter in 1960. Whatcom County was the second. So we are one of just 6 counties that have chosen to adopt home rule and a charter out of the 33 counties in the state. It gives us a much greater degree of local control over our county affairs. The other 33 counties in the state have a system of government consisting of 3 commissioners who hold both legislative and administrative responsibilities that are more limited.
So, Judith, who wrote the charter?
Well, in 1977, the county elected a board of freeholders to write the first charter for home rule. And there is actually a picture of those first freeholders in the county courthouse. It's also interesting, if you get hold of a copy of the charter, to see all of the people who've served on the charter review commissions over the years. Those original freeholders you'll recognize many of their names because they were very much a part of county life. They asked for and received a great deal of public input as they wrote the charter, and then the voters elected to adopt the charter in 1978.
Well, how were home rules and the charter different from what we had before?
Well, as Don Hansey said, and he was the first chair of the Charter Review Commission, the major change is adopting home rule in itself to give control of county affairs to the people of the county rather than to requiring legislation from Olympia. The charter replaced the 3-commissioner form of government with a 7-member part-time elected council and a full-time elected executive to adopt laws, ordinances, and to administer them as well as to oversee county services. The council and the executive are elected in nonpartisan races. In addition, the charter provides for the right of initiative and referendum to the people of the county, a right that is not available to the other 3 counties without home rule.
Okay, thank you. So that's the charter. Now, why does it need to be reviewed, and who are these commissioners that we're electing, Judith?
Yes. The charter requires that every 10 years a group of 15 citizens, a commission, be elected by the county to review the charter to see if it still meets the needs of the county and citizens, or if they believe it's necessary to amend the charter and put proposals for amendments on the following year's ballot. So the charter was first reviewed by an elected Charter Review Commission in 1985, and then every 10 years afterward. Commissioners regularly hold open meetings and actively seek comment from the public as they do their review. Amendments have been recommended after each review. Some were approved and some were rejected by the voters. Amendments can also be proposed by the public through an initiative or by the county council. However they are proposed, the ultimate authority rests with the voters. This is a nonpartisan election, and the only qualification is that the candidates be registered voters. There is no primary. Commissioners serve without pay and are elected for 1-year terms.
So now we need, once again, to choose 15 commissioners to review the charter. And we may ask, how do I choose with so many candidates running for these positions?
This is a bit of a challenge, isn't it? As you're probably aware, there are 3 county council districts, and for each district, the voters will elect 5 candidates from his or her own district. There are 50 candidates in all, but the commissioners are selected, again, by voters in their district only, so that winnows the number of contenders down to 20 in County Council District 1, 18 in District 2, and 12 in District 3. Again, repeat, you will vote for only 5 candidates from your own district, so that narrows the field a bit. Some candidates are well known in the community, some are not. Some just want to participate in the democratic process. Others will have specific changes that they would like to see made. The voter's guide is delivered to all Whatcom County households before the election and contains statements from each of the candidates who chose to submit them, and a great majority did. The guide is also available at the Whatcom County Auditor's website. The Bellingham Herald is the League's media partner. It began printing statements from commission candidates on its opinion page for 3 districts at a time. You can read these by going to the website, bellinghamherald.com, and entering charter review candidates in the search area.
What are the qualities that voters should look for in a candidate for this job?
Reviewing the charter is a group effort that requires a number of meetings with people who have different interests, points of view, and interpersonal skills. The process works best when there is an atmosphere of collegiality, where members listen respectfully to one another, try to understand others' points of view, and are determined to consider what is best for the broad community rather than looking for narrow advantage. Look for personal qualities you believe will work well in such a public setting. A willingness to study the issues, to consistently attend meetings, to contribute to the conversation, and to express a point of view in an informed, respectful manner.
Well, why should I make the effort to learn what I can about these candidates?
This is a once-in-a-decade opportunity to shape how your county government is organized and how it functions. If you think it can do better, this is your chance and your time to say so. And the first step in having your say is informing yourself about the candidates, then voting for those that you feel will approach their responsibility with the best interests of their neighbors in mind.
Thank you, Judith. Thanks for helping us better understand the commission and the role of the commissioners. Now, we invited all of the charter review candidates to this morning's forum, and I see many of them are here in the audience. They are wearing name tags that identify them and the district for which they are running. Would the candidates who are here please stand? Okay. Thank you. The candidates cannot engage in campaigning in this building, city rules. But you might want to meet them outside after the forum and hear their ideas. Again, thank you, Judith, for helping us understand this. And the next thing on our agenda is to present the PUD candidates who will be on our ballot. So I would like to introduce League member Rebecca Johnson, who will be our moderator, and invite PUD District 1 Commissioner candidates Jeffrey McClure and Bob Burr to come forward and take your seats.
Thank you, Annette. The public utilities districts are nonprofit, locally regulated utilities. Their charter under state law is to conserve the water and power resources of the state of Washington for the benefit of the people thereof, and to supply public utility service, including water and electricity, for all uses. Their original focus was to service the rural communities. They operate under an elected commission. The Whatcom PUD has 3 commissioners elected for 6-year terms from districts which are the same boundaries as the county council districts. It's a nonpartisan position. The salary of a PUD commissioner is $27,420. Candidates for Whatcom County PUD District 1 are Jeff McClure, the current incumbent, and Bob Burr, the challenger. And gentlemen, please take your places. You've done that. Thank you. Before we start, and I'm just going to repeat this, Annette had spoke about our format, but just to tell you, each candidate is going to present a 1-minute opening statement, and when they arrived this morning, they rolled the dice, and the one who had the highest dice number got to make a choice as if they wanted to go first or second. So after the opening statements, then the candidates are going to answer questions in rotation. They each get 1 minute. So it's a 1-minute opening, a 1-minute closing, and 1-minute questions. We'll begin with a couple of questions from the league, but again, we welcome questions from the audience. So please write them down on index cards. And if you need index cards, we have ushers who have those available to you. And again, we ask that you make them legible. It would be great if they're in ink. And then they're going to come up here to our screeners. And so you pass your cards to the ushers, and they'll bring them here. And our ushers are Diane Davis, Marianne Phelps, and Keith Phelps. So that's great. Riley Abel will be tracking your time, gentlemen. And Carol Como will flash a yellow card sign when there are 15 seconds left to finish, and a red sign to signal stop talking. And if you continue, a bell will ring. And that means we're not kidding. Stop talking now. So Bob Burr won the toss, and he's elected to go second. So we'll begin with Jeff McClure, and then closing statements are going to be in the same order. So, Jeff, your statement,
I've never been
please.
lucky at board games, and dice is no different for me. My name is Jeff McClure, and I'm running for re-election to the PUD Commission. While many people have little knowledge about the PUD, it plays a very important role in supporting some of the highest paying jobs in our community through business and industry in the North County, as well as water for agriculture. The PUD is also very active in ensuring high-quality drinking water throughout the rural parts of Whatcom County, as well as making investments in the environment by supporting organizations like the Nooksack Salmon Enhancement Association. As a business owner and employer in Whatcom County for over 30 years, I want to continue to use my experience to help the PUD confront the issues and opportunities that lie ahead, ensuring the best use of our resources, supporting jobs in our community, using innovative technologies to protect the quantity and quality of our water, and creating a new dialogue in support of environmental and economic sustainability. My opponent has been twisting the facts on occasion to support his own political agenda.
Okay.
We need to broaden that discussion.
And is everyone able to hear that mic well? Can you? I think maybe want to lean in a little. That would
Closer?
I recommend that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Bob.
The PUD holds water rights that are senior to all but the tribes in the city of Bellingham. We have huge water rights decisions ahead of us, and based on past history, I don't trust the incumbent to make those decisions. He is part of the commission that voted unanimously to guarantee 2 billion gallons of Nooksack River water each year to the coal terminal proponents, which they will use to water down acre after acre of 6-story high coal piles. The PUD is not really a PUD, it is an IUD, an industrial utility district. They do very little other than to provide water to Cherry Point and electricity to one customer there. I want to put the public back in the public utility district. Its unexercised water rights must go to the people and to the farms that feed them.
All right. Thank you. All right, so we'll start with our first question. We'll start with Jeff. What do you think is the most significant contribution that the PUD has made to environmental recovery and preservation in the past decade? And what do you think it could have done better? And please give us the reasons for your answers.
I think one of the things that we have done very well, first off, we only use 30% of our total water right. And so we have done a good job of conserving those resources. 10 years ago, the industries at Cherry Point used 18 million gallons per day of water. Today, they use 14 million, and all of those industries have expanded to create more jobs in our community. We've worked closely with industries like Intalco to reduce their water consumption by as much as 75%. We've also done a terrific job, I believe, in working with the small water associations throughout the county, of which there are 320, to ensure safe drinking water. Some of these systems are finding that their systems are failing, and we've been able to work very closely with them to provide safe drinking water, which I think is extremely important. And it's a way that we work throughout the community and throughout Whatcom County.
Thank you. Bob, do you want me to repeat that, or?
Yeah, I think the major achievements in conservation have been with the Cherry Point industries, where water use has been reduced. They've also given small grants to the salmon people for habitat restoration. I think they need to work more with these water associations that Jeff has talked to, because there's still serious water problems. Just today, the headline of the Herald was about how the Lummi had to shut down their shellfishing because of contaminated Nooksack River water. I believe that they could be doing a lot more in the energy field with renewables.
Okay, thank you. All right, and then this next question we're going to start with Bob. If elected, are there existing PUD facilities or programs you would recommend expanding, or new ones you'd support initiating? And please explain your opinion.
Yes, I support studies of whether the PUD could get involved in solar farms, in wind farms if the county approved it, and I definitely think they ought to be involved in broadband provision. As far as the current programs expanding, I would look forward to the PUD working more closely with the water associations to reduce their quality problems, and also to work with the new WIDs if formed.
Want me to repeat that?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure, no problem. If elected, are there existing PU facilities or programs you would recommend expanding, or new ones you'd support initiating? And please explain the opinion.
I already mentioned the work that we're doing with some of the smaller water associations. Some of these associations are simply failing due to old infrastructure and people who, frankly, can't keep up with the environmental regulations that are rightly coming from the state. One of the things that we have proposed is creating a water extension service, very similar to an agricultural extension service, where we as a PUD can provide badly needed help and assistance through the state to either stabilize these operations or help them consolidate with other nearby water associations to create an economy of scale. I was meeting yesterday with some state officials to the Department of Health, and they're very interested in this pilot program, and I think it's one of the most important things that we'll be involved in the coming years.
All right. Now back to you, Joe. We're going back and forth, right? Why do you feel you would be a better PUD commissioner than your opponent?
I want to use this opportunity to kind of highlight some the claim that Bob has been making against me, and that has to do with the signing of a letter in regards to the Cherry Point Aquatic Management Plan. He has stated that I joined other interests to reduce environmental protection for the aquatic reserve, and that could not be further than the truth. I and other public officials in the community reviewed the draft of the management plan that was put out by the Department of Natural Resources. And we were concerned about some provisions in that draft that would made the process very difficult for existing Cherry Point industries. I was joined by former Mayor Tim Douglas and former State Senator Dale Bramlin in signing this letter and supporting strict environmental controls for the Cherry Point Aquatic Reserve.
Okay, thank you. And you want me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
So the question is, why do you feel you would make a better PUD commissioner than your opponent?
Because I don't have a track record on the commission, and he does, and I don't like what he's done. This particular letter that he and I have been arguing over, I suggest you make up your minds yourself. Google Jeff McClure, aquatic reserves, and you'll find the letter and read it and decide whether the letter called for the relaxation of studies done in the Cherry Point Aquatic Reserve.
All right, Bob, back to you.
And I think I'm equally or better qualified by education than Jeff is as well.
Thank you. This next question is back to you. Why has the PUD already awarded a 30-year contract to Gateway Terminal for almost 2 billion gallons of water?
Why did they?
Yes. Do you know?
Beats the heck out of me. This contract was inherited or bought by Pacific International Terminals from Chevron in 2009. It was set to expire in 2015. It was renewable on a year-to-year basis, and there was no need whatsoever to extend that for 30 years. We have potential water shortage problems in this county. We certainly have problems with water rights. Water rights are a mess. And to commit 2 billion gallons a year for 30 years, to me, was nonsensical and nearly evil.
Shall I repeat that question?
Would you please?
Yes. Why has the PUD already awarded a 30-year contract to Gateway Terminal for almost 2 billion gallons of water?
SSA purchased the Chevron site ostensibly for the purposes of the Gateway Terminal, and with that purchase, they acquired the water contract that came with that. When the contract came up for renewal, as all of our contracts do come up for renewal, all of our major water contracts had come up, we made the decision to extend that contract for the 30-year period, as we have done consistently with all of our industries. I want to make one thing very clear here, though. There's a stipulation in the contract that we will supply water if and only if land use approvals are granted for the Gateway Pacific Terminal. There is a very robust process of review going on right now, environmental review through the county and through the state. We feel it is our duty and our responsibility to serve water commensurate with land use decisions. The land use discussion will occur there, and we all will be involved and need to be involved because as community members, we have an important stake.
All right. Now we're back. We're going to start back with you again. What is your position regarding creation of water irrigation districts?
As many people probably have read, there's a lot of discussion in the North County about creating 4 additional watershed improvement districts where farmers are coming together and forming these districts so that they can have a consistent voice in the very active water discussions that are going on. I'm very much in support of these the formation of these watershed improvement districts. We already have 2 in the North County, the Bertrand watershed and the Linden watershed, and I think they've been very successful. It's an opportunity for a very independent group. Farmers by nature are very independent to come together and jointly decide how best to manage watershed resources. They can also provide education on best management practices because I believe that's going to be an important part of managing the water quality in the North County so that we have adequate buffers next to streams. I think it's a very important development.
Much to the chagrin of some of my liberal friends, Bob Burr also supports these water improvement or water irrigation districts. I think that obviously farming is tremendously important to this county. I think farmers have been underrepresented at the table when water discussions have been held in the past. And I think this will allow them to organize better to be a louder voice. The concern I have over it is the state-dictated voting method, where each farmer gets 2 votes per acre, 2 votes per 5 acres held. So basically, these WIDs are set up so that they will be controlled by the large farmers. But despite that, I've met these people and think they're honorable, and I'm fine with the WIDs.
Thank you. All right. Starting with you again on Bob on this one. What's your opinion about expanding PUD services to include telecommunications or fiber optics that address the broadband issues in the more sparsely populated areas of the county where certain parts don't even have any access to the internet?
The PUD is empowered to provide wholesale broadband services, and I think that it should be doing that. They did a study of it and decided not to in the past. I know Tom Anderson, the former managing director of the district, was very much in favor of expanding broadband. Underserved areas include some of the various very wealthiest areas in our county. Semiahmoo is a underserved area as far as broadband is concerned. I would like to see us go one step further and ask the legislature to approve us getting into retail broadband services rather than just wholesale.
I can go ahead and
Okay,
get started on this. Many years ago, many PUDs around the state made an initial effort to get involved in broadband because of some incentives that the Bonneville Power Administration were providing. Those subsequently got pulled back, and many of the PUDs also pulled back as well because they didn't have a support mechanism. Since then, private industry has done a pretty good job of starting to broadcast many of these services around the county, and it's started to catch up. But be that as it may, there are portions of the county that are not well served, and it's a particular, I think, concern because of public safety. One of the projects that we're currently involved in is creating the backbone, the middle mile, if you will, of an infrastructure that private industry can plug into, extending from Glacier all the way down to Acme. And I think these kinds of private-public partnerships are what we really do well, as let private industry do the best with what they can do, and we do the best too.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so now you have to breathe because we're going to go to the next one. This is from the audience. Someone read an article this morning suggesting that the solution to our water problems is to increase water rates. Do you support increasing water rates for your industrial clients?
I recently read a very interesting paper by a gentleman by the name of Ed Hurst, I believe, that was a very well-reasoned argument for providing variable rates during periods of low flow in the river. And I think it's a really interesting concept. It's a difficult one to implement and deserves quite a lot more discussion, particularly if we extend that, as he suggested in that paper, to private well owners, because those of course, start to talk about private property rights and the like that. But in this period of climate change, when we're looking for ways to continue to conserve water, I think priority rates on water start to make some sense. The implementation has to be carefully thought out, however.
I am not aware of the current structure of water rates for the industry at Cherry Point, whether they are higher in the peak demand periods or not. I think they should be. I also know that there's been the threat in the past of one of the major industries of leaving there because of rates. The city of Ferndale left the PUD provision of water a few years back because the PUD wanted to raise their rates 100% over 4 years, and the mayor who supports my opponent decided he'd rather go with his own well water, that was too much of an increase.
All right. Next question, starting again with you, Bob. How does the PUD fit into the county watershed management plan that is currently being updated? And what would you, as a commissioner, want to see that plan include? And then please be specific about your ideas.
Yeah, they're an active player, both on the big group and the planning group for the WRIA, and they should continue to be. I've attended some of the meetings, and the general manager does a good job of participating in them. We're all waiting for a federal government quantification of the rights to in-stream flow that the Lummi Nation and the Nooksack tribe have, and it's going to be hard to sort out these water rights until that is adjudicated. We have more rights than we have water. The PUD has more unexercised rights than it has exercised rights, so it can be a major player, and I hope that it comes down in helping the people and the ag.
Can we repeat it?
Would you please?
Sure. How does the PUD fit into the county watershed management plan that is currently being updated? And what would you, as a commissioner, want to see that plan include? And please be specific about your ideas.
As Bob pointed out, the PUD is a very, very active participant in all of the water conversations that are going on around the county. And it is phenomenal, just within the past 5 years, how many people are talking about water, water resources, and water rights. I think we've both been to a number of meetings, and it's a very, very complex discussion because it's difficult to sort out, to find a win-win for everyone. We will continue to play a large role on the Joint Planning Board, and the Planning Unit, all of these very critical discussions. But one of the things I would like to see in particular is to somehow figure out this nexus between fishing and farming. Both are very important to our economy and to our culture, and yet fish and farming need water most often at the driest months of the year. And this is the difficult situation that we're going to have to confront as a community in order to, I have to stop now. Yes. Stay tuned.
No bell, that's good though. I have a question that's sort of a follow-up on that, so we'll just keep that going. And then it's going to start with you, Jeff. So the PUD has provided, oops, that's not the one, sorry. Sorry.
You have 1 minute.
Ding, 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 ding. Well, okay, I'm going to just move ahead with this one. The PUD has provided, it's this one. How would you resolve the complex issues of access to water for what seems to be competing purposes, such as fisheries, agriculture, municipalities, existing and new residences and industries?
Yeah, this is a very good question.
Thank you.
Good follow-up. Good follow-up.
I knew it was here. I put a note on the back of it.
I want to give people the context of the water that we're talking about. If you were to go to the USGS website, and look at the Ferndale monitoring station for the Nooksack River right now, or at least last night when I looked at it, it's flowing at about 2,500 cubic feet per second. Industry that we currently provide water to takes 25 cubic feet per second. So that's less than 1% of the river. So in the context, now the river fluctuates to peaks of 15,000 cubic feet per second to lower during the summer. So we're talking about water, a small amount of water, but nonetheless it's important to use that very, very wisely. I think like I said, I think in this nexus between fishing and farming, both are very important. I've spoken with people like Tom Thornton at Cloud Mountain Farm about smarter ways to irrigate. These kind of best practices are going to be very important in the discussion.
Ding. Bob, so yeah, how would you resolve the complex issues of access to water for what seems to be these competing purposes? Fisheries, agriculture?
Well, I do think that the tribes have treaty rights which must be protected. We have abandoned the tribes time and time again as far as their treaty rights are concerned. Next to the tribes, I think that existing water users, ag and people, would be my priority. My last priority would be to provide water to new development, whether it be residential development or industrial development. If there is going to be a water shortage, I think the water should go to the people who are already here rather than the people who want to move here, and there will be many of those because of droughts elsewhere.
This is somewhat of a follow-up question on that. What are your goals? This starts with you, Bob. What are your goals for assuring adequate levels of electricity and reasonable rates for existing and potential PUD electricity customers into the future?
Well, again, it only has one big electricity user now. I don't think it has a lot of plans to expand that. It may provide electricity, from what I've heard on the grapevine, to some new Lummi developments, or water to new Lummi developments. But I have no plans for the expansion of electrical service. It does not seem to be a priority of the PUD.
In regards to electrical service, we are largely a water utility. We've grown up that way. That's kind of in our DNA. Though we have from time to time looked at what it would take and what it would mean for the citizens to expand electrical service throughout Whatcom County. We have a great partnership with Puget Sound Energy. We work very cooperatively with them. It would be very difficult for us to acquire that utility and make good economic sense or better service. Now, if there was ever a time where we felt like the citizens were paying too high for rates or not getting good service, we would certainly jump in. But our priorities are really toward the water discussions in this community, and we don't want to spread our resources too thin on that important environmental initiative.
Okay, this is our last question before your closing remarks. And we're going to start with you, Jeff. It was suggested in a recent Cascadia Weekly article on water usage in the county that a modest tax based on rates of usage at different times of the day or different seasons might be a way of promoting water conservation. What is your view of this idea?
I think we answered some of that through the variable rates in the water, but let me extend that to, I guess, private usage. Every city every city within Whatcom County has its own water system. Bellingham does, Linden does. It's different from, say, Skagit County, where Skagit County PUD provides all of that. I think, so I'm a little bit out of my context here when I talk about conservation, but I think as citizens, we all need to take a more proactive look at how we are using water. So I'm very much in support of those measures to put meters, to encourage people to use this resource wisely. And I think most people are of a mind that they feel that this is an important issue.
Thanks.
I haven't studied the issue enough to really comment on it. As a general rule, I'm not in favor of taxing your way out of problems. I think that that there are better ways to conserve energy than taxation. So I am through with that question, ready to go to closing comments.
Okay, and so again, with our toss, we're going to start with time for your closing minutes. You each have 1 minute, and Jeff, we're going to begin with you.
First of all, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for conducting this event, and to the City of Bellingham and the Bellingham Herald. Throughout my business career and my years of community service, I would like to think I have earned a reputation for balanced and fair-minded decision-making. Though we run the PUD like a business, it operates in a very complex environment of public policies and regulations. As a commissioner, it takes a deliberate investment of time to understand these intricacies. I'm concerned my opponent has not spent that time to understand our business. Since his announcement of his candidacy 4.5 months ago, he's attended only one of our commission meetings, and that indicates to me a lack of interest. I am interested in creating a more certain water future for our county, and the PUD must continue to be an honest broker in those discussions. It's in this nonpartisan race, I'm honored to be endorsed by City of Bellingham Mayor Kelly Linville, Mayors Scott Courthouse and Gary Jensen, as well as members in the ag community. I ask for your vote on November 4.
Check my website, burrforwhatcom.com, for endorsements. In my past life, I was executive in charge of research and development for a Fortune 500 company. I would like to use those skills to aid the PUD in getting involved in innovative new ways to serve county residents. The PUD is not living up to the mission it was given when it was created 75 years ago. Change is needed on the commission to put the farmers and the people first. The PUD needs more transparency. Its early morning meetings should be moved to the evening so working folks can attend. Too much work is done behind the scenes and not discussed in public. How many of you knew of the plan to provide 5.3 million gallons of water a day to the coal terminal before it was fait accompli? How many of you are just learning of this today? Clearly, it's time for change. Elect Bob Burr to the Public Utility District.
All right, thank you. Thank you both for participating in this forum, and thank you for your willingness to perform. Thank you for your willingness to perform this public service. I want to remind everyone that if you live in the 1st District, these 2 candidates will be on your ballot. If you live in the council districts 2 or 3, you won't see any candidates for the PUD.
No, you will. Yeah, it's a countywide race.
Well, we have missed. There it was. Thank you, gentlemen. So look for these gentlemen on all of your ballots. And I'd like to now introduce our co-president of the league, Jill Bernstein. Oops.
Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you to everyone for attending. Just to follow up on what Judith was showing you at the beginning, that little booklet that she held up that had the current version of the charter in it and the names of the people who have served on the Charter Commission. I've been in touch with the county executive's office, and they have told me that the county council has printed these. They're available in the county council offices, and if you'd like a copy, stop by and pick it up. It will help further inform your decision as you get ready to vote in this next election. The process for discussion today about the pros and cons of the ballot initiative is going to run in much the same way as we just handled the PUD candidates, in that each one will get 1 minute for an opening statement, 1 minute for a closing statement, and 1 minute to rotate their answers to the questions. Today we're going to have a discussion first of ballot initiative 1351, and I'd ask that both our pro speaker, who is Senator Marco Lilius, come forward, and also the person speaking on the con side, Mr. J.R. Johnson, come forward. And as they do, let me take a moment to remind you that your questions are truly welcomed. If you need more white index cards, just raise your hand and they'll be provided. If you've already written your questions and they haven't come forward yet, again, raise your hand and our ushers will bring them forward, because this is your opportunity to ask questions. The League will help facilitate that. Let me take a moment and share with you a discussion of what will be on the your ballot in terms of Initiative 1351. It says this measure would direct the legislature to allocate funds to reduce class sizes and increase staffing support for students in all K through 12 grades, with additional class size reductions and staffing increases in high poverty schools. And then we'll ask you, should this measure be enacted into law, yes or no? The State League of Women Voters has not taken a position on this initiative, but we would like to welcome both Senator Lilius and Mr. Johnson. Welcome today.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming. So I understand that the process today will begin with the pro speaker for the initiative in terms of the opening statements, and that means that Senator Lilius will begin with an opening statement of 1 minute, and that will be followed by Mr. J.R. Johnson. So welcome, Senator. And would you please take 1 minute to share with us? Oh, but one thing that is the same here, which is yellow means you're getting close to the end, and red means stop talking, and the bell means we're getting the cane to pull you off. Okay. So, starting with you, Senator Marco Lilius, would you please share with us why you're supporting this initiative?
Thank you very much for the invitation to participate. Initiative 1351 would reduce class sizes so that students of all ages, from all backgrounds, from all parts of our state, would have the opportunity to learn and grow in uncrowded classrooms. And this is important for a couple of reasons, especially for our most struggling students. For students that are struggling to make progress in school, the lack of attention and one-on-one work with their teachers is critically important to help them succeed. It's also critically important for our young people that are trying to learn important math and science skills in this 21st century economy, when we've got students packed into classrooms where they don't have adequate lab space, they don't have the time and attention they need to learn the tough concepts of mathematics. Reducing our class sizes will help them succeed. It's also important to note that Washington is 47th out of the 50 states in our class size. I think we can all agree that our students deserve better than 47th in the country. This initiative will get us on the right path in a phased way to correct that problem.
Thank you. As a former high school and middle school educator of 8 years, I know reduced class sizes make a measurable difference in creating an effective learning environment. I also know that when you create frustrating obstacles to an already exasperating challenge, the students are less inclined to give their best efforts and more so to give up. I'm concerned Initiative 1351 will create such an environment. Like the initiative passed and ignored in the year 2000, it is poorly written, fails to identify a funding source, and requires an additional $2 billion on top of what lawmakers are already struggling to achieve. It calls for an increase of all school staff, administrators, janitors, para-eds, more so than teachers, and doesn't address building expansions that would no doubt need to follow such an influx of staff. This initiative does not address the core of education reform. Bloating administration and staff support to an already troubled system ignores core reform issues. I-1351 is a distraction. Our focus should be moving on in education to the 21st century in content and structure. Thank you.
Thank you. And first of all, let me start with an apology to the senator. It's Senator Leas, and I apologize for the mispronunciation. We'll start with a question for you, Senator. In your view, would the key elements of this measure substantially meet the specific needs of students of different ages, backgrounds, and educational goals? Why or why not? Please be specific about the reasons for your opinion.
I appreciate it. I believe it would absolutely meet the needs of differentiated students and different populations. The way that the initiative was crafted was the legislature created what we call the Quality Education Council to make recommendations on how schools should be funded. And the initiative uses the recommendations of the Quality Education Council for how our schools should be funded and funds them to those recommendations so that class sizes would reduce from 28 in some grades to 25. And for students in our most struggling schools, we'd see class sizes of 15 or 17 so that they get the one-on-one instruction they need, particularly in those tough subjects like math or science, to be able to get the education that they deserve. So I believe that it does meet the needs of different populations. It was crafted based on the legislature's own bipartisan expert panel, and it's implemented in a phased way to allow the cost to be spread out over time.
And Mr. Johnson?
Would you mind repeating the question one more time?
I'd be delighted to. In your view, would the key elements of this measure substantially meet the specific needs of students of different ages, backgrounds, and educational goals? Why or why not? And please be specific about the reasons for your opinion.
Sure. Obviously, efforts to reduce class sizes would help out students in the learning environments. But the approach that this initiative has is a little clumsy in addressing exactly how they plan on reducing those class sizes by merely just increasing staff within those schools doesn't necessarily address what classrooms those new classes are going to be formed in. Or do they need to now create bigger or more buildings and portables outside? Are they going to have more para-eds in the room, which just creates more people within that one classroom? So I don't think it necessarily helps in the way that it's intending to. It really isn't addressing the core issues of what we need to do for education reform.
Starting with you, Mr. Johnson, do you think the key elements of this measure meet the Supreme Court mandate that the legislature fully fund K through 12 education, and why or why not?
Well, I don't think it does, because what the Olympia is trying to do right now to meet that mandate is meet a specific dollar amount. And what this initiative does is it adds an extra $2 billion on top of that dollar amount, which creates a really exasperating condition for the legislatures in Olympia to something that is already a real complex problem. They've been working on this for 3 years and making very slow progress on the issue. And to have this kind of mandate on top of that would really be a setback and a delay. They are addressing this issue already. They're doing it in incremental controlled measures, and frankly, they have already, and the senator, my notes, had already looked at this initiative. It was a legislative review, almost a carbon copy of what this initiative is, and they declined it as impractical.
Senator?
Can I get the question again?
You bet.
Thank you.
Do you think the key elements of this measure meet the Supreme Court mandate that the legislature fully fund K through 12 education, and why or why not?
Absolutely, this meets the court's mandate. In fact, James Rosenfeld, who's the director of education law programs at Seattle University School of Law, and Gary Plano, the superintendent of Mercer Island Schools, wrote a letter to the Seattle Times and said that 1351's reductions are essential to meeting our constitutional obligation to Washington students. I think common sense dictates that small classes are critical to our schools, and when the legislature was ordered to fully fund our schools, that means fully funding classrooms where students can learn. Initiative 1351 would allow us to make progress in meeting the requirements that the Supreme Court's given us. It's not an obstacle or an extra burden. It's a core element of making sure that our schools are fully funded and high quality for all students, regardless of their background, all across the state, that they would have an equal opportunity to learn in a classroom where they can actually get the instruction that they need one-on-one from their teacher.
Mr. Johnson?
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't I already answer the question?
You did. Thank you.
You get points for honesty, too.
Kept going a whole nother minute.
So we'll start again with the senator then. What are the advantages or disadvantages of making classroom size the centerpiece of the complex discussion about educational reform in Washington? Please be specific about the reasons for your opinion.
So the U.S. Department of Education has identified only 4 major reforms that actually significantly improve student performance, and one of those is class size reduction. We are 47th in the nation in our class sizes in Washington State, and this is especially troubling for our struggling students. So focusing on one of 4 proven reforms in a state where we are so far behind the national average will mean that we can make meaningful progress for all of our students, regardless of their background or what part of the state they're from, that they can make progress and meet their educational outcomes. This is a tough economy and a tough global competitive situation. We need our kids to learn math and science and the skills that will help them succeed. If they're in science classrooms where they can't access the lab equipment, if they're in classrooms where they can't get that math teacher to help explain a concept, they can't learn those concepts and learn those skills that they need. So this initiative allows us to make one of 4 proven reforms work and take Washington from 47th in the country to something far more effective and far better for our kids.
Now, Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
thank you.
Well, some of the other points of proven reform are looking at the curriculum as a whole and creating a more holistic curriculum that could reach out to the students and something that will be more that something that the students could relate to. So really focusing on things like the curriculum and being able to have them be able to learn math, and not only math, but in social studies as well. To put in classes such as financial literacy are also of great import and something that will allow the children to and the students to learn and walk away from class more successful. Also, other reforms such as community outreach and having the community more involved with their local schools is something that is just as important, if not more, and the classroom reduction will follow.
And Mr. Johnson, is there a viable alternative to the initiative that you would consider?
Yeah, well, as I stated before, our voted representatives are there because we entrust them to be able to make these right decisions for us. Well, not just for us, but with our input. And so we need to give them the opportunity and the chance to make this measure work in a way that will work with all of the education reform that they are working on down in Olympia. I believe that Congress and the House of Representatives and the Senate they are able to work through this challenge and to address student class size reduction without an initiative mandating certain goals within just a box, and being able to have that flexibility is important.
Senator?
The question was if there's a viable alternative, and I don't believe that the alternatives that are in front of us are acceptable to our students. The legislature's current plan would only fund some class size reduction from kindergarten to 3rd grade. So those high school students that we're trying to get prepared for technical jobs and math and science would not get any relief. Those science labs where they're crammed in so full that they can't even get access to the equipment, there would be no relief in the alternative. So I think that Initiative 1351 is an important way for the public to send a clear message to the governor and to our legislature that 47th in the nation in class size is not acceptable. We want this to be a priority, and here's a phased-in way that we can address this so that all of our students, regardless of their background or what part of their state they're from, will have the opportunity to learn and succeed in our schools and get the one-on-one time with their teachers that we know is vitally important to developing the important skills. This is a tough economy, a tough world to compete in. Our kids are going to need to learn and understand even more than we did when we were going through school, and so to make sure that they have those skills is really important.
And Senator, what would be different about this class size measure than the one that the voters previously passed that the legislature overturned?
That's a good question. The previous initiative, Initiative 728, wasn't quite as broad or comprehensive, and Initiative 728 wasn't the product of a bipartisan review by the legislature's own experts. So Initiative 1351 uses, as I've shared, the work by the Quality Education Council, a bipartisan group of legislators and experts that the legislature has created that made recommendations and recommended all of the funding levels that are included in the initiative. So the drafters and authors of the initiative didn't come up with the class size targets. It's the legislature's own experts that came up with those targets. We're just asking that those be funded and that those be a priority. So I think that those are the major differences. It is important to note that regardless of the mechanism, 728, which was passed years ago, or Initiative 1351, our kids deserve smaller class sizes. 47th in the nation isn't acceptable. We need to provide all of our students, regardless of their background or where they are from in our state, an opportunity to succeed in our schools.
Mr. Johnson.
I don't see a lot of difference between the two measures, and I'd be very surprised if this measure passes that the same result doesn't happen with the legislature either overturning it or just ignoring it completely. I think that the big difference that we see is the conditions that Olympia is under right now. In the year 2000, they weren't under a mandate by the Supreme Court, and so having throwing a whole new set of mandates on top of those mandates there will not help the issue. It's going to just exacerbate the challenge, and that's something that is going to result in a inferior product coming from Olympia.
Again, Mr. Johnson, Initiative 1351 isn't just about reducing class size. It's also about extra staffing for kindergarten through 12th grades. Realistically, is this financially doable, and how would we best fund this if it passes?
Well, again, it's education reform is a holistic approach, and this is just focusing on one building block of that holistic approach, and it's doing it essentially in a vacuum. So it's ignoring all the other working parts that make education reform viable and effective, and trying to move education into the 21st century so our children can compete in this global economy. It makes it a lot less effective. I think that not only does it talk about staffing in the lower grades, but again, it talks about increasing staffing in administration, in support, in maintenance as well. So where all this is going to fit into education reform is tough to say, and it's almost like now the legislature has to work around this one aspect to make it all fit.
Senator?
You know, I disagree a little bit that this is in a vacuum. The initiative actually funds the school model that recognizes that our students need not just a great classroom teacher, but they also need good school counselors and nurses and librarians to provide a good menu of services and a wide diversity of services for our students. So the bulk of the investment in Initiative 1351 is in classroom teachers so that we get those class sizes reduced, but it also recognizes that our students need the support outside of that classroom from nurses and librarians, from school counselors and other professionals to help them learn and succeed as well. So again, every student, regardless of their background, regardless of what part of Washington they're from, deserves an equal opportunity to succeed in a small class with teachers that can give them the attention they deserve, and also with a team of professionals, librarians and others that are going to help them succeed and learn the skills that they need to thrive in this tough economy.
And Senator, what do you believe is real education reform?
I think real education reform is making sure that our students have quality teachers that are ready to give them the best education possible in a class size where they can receive that instruction effectively. So ensuring that our teachers, and I've met thousands of teachers over the course of my work in the Senate, they're all working hard to provide our kids with a great education. But when they're in the 47th worst class sizes in the nation, when you've got high school math and science classes with 35 or 38 students, it's impossible for even a high-quality teacher to reach all those students and provide the dedicated and the professional one-on-one instruction that they need. So giving our students the time and attention from well-educated, well-trained teachers, I think that's the core of reform. We don't need fancy new programs. We don't need all sorts of acronyms. We need a great teacher in a classroom where they can provide the instruction one-on-one that our kids need and deserve.
Mr. Johnson.
Well, I absolutely agree with the Senator that quality teachers is one of the core points to education reform and having effective education. Unfortunately, this initiative doesn't address quality teachers. It addresses quantity of teachers. It's asking to just put an influx of staff into the school, but again fails to address something that many advocates, including myself, have been pushing for, which is making teaching a more attractive position for more qualified citizens in our community so that they will come into those positions and become more effective within our classrooms. Along with that, I think that also having a holistic curriculum that is something that will be more relevant to the students so they can relate to it more, and that also helps in a learning environment. It's not necessarily that we have overcrowded classrooms, it's that we have outdated curriculum and that the students fail to learn because of that.
Mr. Johnson, do you believe that the state's paramount duty is to provide education for our students? And do you think that we need to further define what is meant by paramount duty?
I don't know how else you can define paramount duty as the #1 priority in this state. And yes, Article 10 does say that this is our paramount duty to provide quality education for our students in this state, and we have completely failed in doing that, and it needs to be a priority for all of Olympia and all citizens. It's something that we absolutely need to focus on more than anything else, but coming with just one-stop measures like this is not going to address the issue in its entirety, and it needs to be something that works together as a whole. And so that's my real concern with this initiative, that it will serve as a distraction, and it will all of a sudden be a obstacle for not only the legislature but also for advocates in creating that ideal education system of the 21st century that we so sorely need.
Senator?
And I would take it from the other perspective. I think it would be impossible for us to say we're providing our kids with a high-quality public education if we continued to force them to sit in crowded classrooms, 47th worst in the nation in class size. I think that making sure our students have the time and attention from their teachers to learn the skills we're asking them to learn is at the very core of what a basic education should be, especially today as the skills and issues that we're asking them to learn are incredibly technical and incredibly sophisticated. The math and science that we're going to all be required to use in this 21st century economy are skills that take time and understanding to develop. And so making sure that every student across the state, regardless of their background, has a classroom where they can get the time and attention from their teacher, the one-on-one instruction we know is so vitally important, is at the very core of providing that paramount duty to our students. I think this is exactly what the people and what the court is hoping that we'll accomplish.
And Senator, what organizations or individuals share your view about Initiative 1351?
Well, the organization that is actually sponsoring the initiative is called Class Size Counts. It's a statewide grassroots coalition of parents and community leaders, public officials, and you can find the full list of folks that participate in that at ClassSizeCountsWA.com. And it includes some superintendents, it includes school board members from around the state, it includes the superintendent of public instruction, Randy Dorn, it includes community groups like El Centro de la Raza in Seattle. It's a broad coalition of folks that have come together, and the list is too long to name in front of you today, but if you go to ClassSizeCountsWA.com, you can see the whole list of folks participating in this grassroots mission.
Mr. Johnson.
To name a few of those who are against Initiative 1351, the Washington Association of Administrators, Washington PTA, the 43rd District Democrats, several newspaper editorials, including the Seattle Times that wrote a scathing editorial on it, Washington Research Council, Stand for Children, just to name a few. Several people recognize that this is really an incomplete initiative, and it's something that won't be effective. As a matter of fact, doesn't exactly address classroom reduction more so than ratios, which is a different situation. You're still going to have those overcrowded classrooms, just going to apply more staff, not necessarily full-fledged teachers, certified teachers, but para-eds instead. And so it's a bit incomplete.
And so, Mr. Johnson, what do you see as the role of teacher training and evaluation in the overall approach to providing the highest quality education for our children? Does this initiative adequately address that element of the school system? Why or why not?
Well, I don't believe that it really addresses any kind of teacher training at all. It is the mandate calls for an increase in total school staff by 25%. So I don't think that really addresses any kind of training to best practices or curriculum development or anything else that needs to be part of what education reform is. Again, it is a very focused initiative and one that doesn't quite meet all the needs of education reform.
Senator?
And I disagree. The legislature has passed what we call the Teacher and Principal Evaluation Program. It's been nationally recognized as one of the best models for evaluating teachers and helping improve their instruction. That's already the law. Initiative 1351 enables that law to have meaning by giving teachers the time and attention they need to work together to improve their instruction. Mr. Johnson's also criticized the initiative for adding more principals to our schools. Well, we know that in order to make the teacher evaluation system work, we need principals to have the time to sit in classrooms and watch teachers and give them feedback. So making sure that there isn't just one principal trying to meet all the needs of a big school, that they've got an assistant principal that can assist, that's one way of making sure that this evaluation program actually works and actually provides teachers the skills they need. At the core of this initiative is about class size. It's about improving the educational opportunities for our students, but it's also about making sure that our teachers have the resources and skills they need to succeed as well.
Senator, if Initiative 1351 were to be approved by the voters, what do you believe would be the impact on the entire two-year budget to be adopted in the forthcoming legislative session?
So the initiative is phased in over 4 years. The intent is to make sure that the impact is not too severe at any particular point in time. And it's important to realize that this discussion about how much we fund our schools is going to take place in a broader context of meeting the Supreme Court's order. So I believe that we can fit in the cost of this initiative within the overall mission of meeting the Supreme Court's order. And I think that the phased approach of giving the legislature 4 years to fully implement this assures that we can do it in a fiscally prudent manner. At the core of it, though, we're 47th in the country in class size. Our schools are under an order to improve. I think that this is an essential measure to make sure that our students get, regardless of their background or what part of their state they're from, that they get the high-quality instruction, the one-on-one time that they need from their teachers.
And Mr. Johnson.
I appreciate the senator's optimism in thinking that they could fit in another $2 billion on top of whatever amount they're trying to achieve to satisfy the court's mandate. It has taken 3 years, and there's been very little progress on what they have already achieved. To add another $2 billion mandated on top of that, I fail to see how they're going to be able to just easily work it into their formula that they're creating down in Olympia. It's a very complex issue, and this initiative just makes things more complex.
And unfortunately, we've run out of time for questions. It's time for your closing statement. Mr. Johnson.
Again, thanks to the League of Women's Voters for putting this on. It's been fantastic. This initiative is a carbon copy of the legislation reviewed by both houses in Olympia just this year, and it was deemed too expensive and impractical given its current challenges. The school system is under intense scrutiny by the state Supreme Court as woefully underfunded, and 1351 will not address but only exacerbate the issue. For 3 years, state legislatures have struggled to secure the funding the Supreme Court mandates, and with I-1351 failing to identify its funding source, it will only serve as a distraction to a more systematic problem. The initiative, created and backed by the teachers' unions, only distracts voters from the larger issue of education reform. I-1351 is a distraction and exercise in futility and will only delay the more important reform measures that will bring our state school system to a higher standards we expect.
Senator.
Thank you. Initiative 1351 is not the product of one particular interest. It's the product of a grassroots organization called Class Size Counts. And it's designed to reduce class sizes across Washington schools so that all of our students, regardless of their background, regardless of what part of the state they live in, have an opportunity to grow and learn and succeed in our classrooms and get the one-on-one instruction that they need from teachers to succeed. As I shared at the outset, this is especially important for our struggling students who need that extra time and attention from their teachers and aren't getting that in a classroom full of 35 or 38 while they're trying to struggle and trying to with our other students to learn these difficult concepts. In this 21st century economy, we know that math and science and the skills that are associated with that are more important than ever. And making sure that our students have small class sizes in those math and science classrooms is really important. We're 47th in the nation. We can do better than that. Our students deserve better than that. Initiative 1351 ensures that this is a priority moving forward for our state.
Thank you both so much. And I'd ask the audience to join with the League in thanking both of our speakers for appearing here today. As many of you know, there are two initiatives on the ballot that will deal with guns. The League did invite proponents from I-591 to appear. They declined to appear, and out of fairness, we are not going to have pro and con speakers related to I-591 here today, but I would share with you the language that you will find on the ballot this fall. I-591 will read, "This measure would prohibit government agencies from confiscating guns or other firearms from citizens without due process or from requiring background checks on firearm recipients unless a uniform national standard is required. Should this measure be enacted into law, yes or no?" You'll find more information about this initiative in your voter pamphlet, and the League would like to encourage all of you to study the initiative and to learn as much about it as you can on your own. While we are not going to present speakers on I-591, we will have speakers on Initiative 594. And I'd ask you to join me in welcoming Reverend Brown, who will be speaking for the initiative, and Mr. Westerfield, who will be appearing against the initiative. Gentlemen, please, if you would.
How do you do it? Do you have a business card? I'm sorry, I don't.
So welcome to both of you. And the League is so pleased to have you here today to talk about this initiative. I would start off by saying that the State League of Women Voters has taken a position on this measure in favor of the passage of the initiative. There will be materials in the lobby available after this forum if you are interested in any of the League's positions. That being said, we are absolutely committed to an unbiased presentation of the positions for and against this initiative. Starting with you, Reverend Brown, would you please make a 1-minute opening statement about your position, please?
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me here today, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for having this event. I am here to speak on behalf of Initiative 594. I've lived in many different parts of Washington State, eastern and western Washington. I'm here today to speak on behalf of 594, but in particular to speak on behalf of someone by the name of Monique Williams. Monique Williams was a woman who was living in an apartment in the Tri-Cities, and her former domestic partner managed to make his way into her apartment. He shot her, and then he shot himself. And what happened was that he had been able, even though he was restricted from buying a gun, he had been able to find a gun online, and he used that online gun to kill his former domestic partner. It's time for us to do something about the enormous background check loophole that allows easy access to guns by criminals, and that's why I'm in favor of Initiative 594.
Mr. Westerfield.
The French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau said, "Falsehood has an infinity of combinations, but truth has only one mode of being." I am not at all opposed to the rules and laws that exist now for background checks. I am very much opposed to I-594 because it is a sham. It promises to do things it cannot do. The supporters of it and the advertising that they're doing is full of untruths, misconceptions, and a number of things that just are not true. One of the things is the so-called online purchase. Those people who are selling guns online, dealers and distributors across the country, are regulated by federal law. And it is required that if they ship a gun to this state, they have to ship it to a federally licensed dealer, and the person has to come in and fill out the same paperwork they would have to fill out and get a background check as if they were buying it from our own inventory.
So the first question will go to Mr. Westerfield. Does this measure make a contribution to public safety? Why or why not? And please explain your reasons for this point of view.
It does not. The overwhelming majority of firearms that are sold in this state are sold through dealers. There have been 311,000 background checks in this state so far this year. In the first 8 months of the year, 311,000 background checks have occurred. The second largest group of people buying firearms are people who are acquiring firearms through family gifts and trades and whatever. The smallest number of people in this state acquiring firearms are criminals, and criminals are not getting them online or at gun shows or at stores. They are getting them out of the trunks of cars of other criminals. 230,000 guns are stolen in this country every year. 80% of those guns are never recovered, and that's where the criminals are getting their guns.
Reverend Brown.
I just have to say I'm shocked to hear an untruth from this responsible gentleman who just a few moments ago said that online sales of guns are regulated by the federal government. That is just untrue. And anybody here who has a smartphone, I invite you to go to a website called armslist.com. And you can go there and you can get a gun from a private party, and you do not have to go through a criminal background check. And it's untruths like this that are distracting people from the fact that 40,000 guns are available online for people to purchase without a criminal background check. And about 10% of those are likely to go to people who should not be able to purchase guns in Washington State. And this is precisely what we have to stop. That's why it's important for us to vote for Initiative 594.
Reverend Brown, what effect do you think passing Initiative 594 will have on those who legally possess firearms?
The effect that, well, first of all, the effect is that it will have no effect on responsible gun owners. The effect will come when a person wants to sell a gun. That's the primary effect. And what it means is they will have to take their gun along with the purchaser, and they will have to go to a store just like Mr. Westerfield's. And at that point, they will have to go through the same criminal background check that is required at Mr. Westerfield's store before they can legally sell the gun to that person. So that's where the difference is going to be. It's going to be at the moment in which a responsible gun owner decides that they want to be certain that that gun does not fall into the hands of somebody that should not have it. That's why we're passing initiative and working on Initiative 594.
Mr. Westerfield?
Please repeat the question.
My pleasure. What effect do you think passing I-594 will have on those who legally possess firearms?
It will not have a great effect other than just to be an inconvenience. And I think it's interesting to note that two of the most respectable law enforcement organizations in the state are opposed to this initiative. One of them is Whatcom, and one of them is Westlaifia, the Washington State Law Enforcement Firearms Instructors Association. They know that this will be completely ineffective and ineffectual, and that there's a waste of time and energy. The average person who's buying guns these days is buying them in stores. They're buying them legally. They're buying them appropriately. And this law is not going to have a big effect on them. It is also not going to have any effect at all whatsoever on criminals. As I stated earlier, criminals buy their guns from other criminals. The issue of people who are mentally unbalanced getting firearms is a completely different issue, and it needs to be addressed because half the states in the United States do not do a proper job of reporting. The Washington state does have laws that require us to report mentally disturbed people, but we do not know how well that's happening. It might interest you to know that the state that does the best job of that is Texas, and the state that does the worst job of it is the most anti-gun state in the United States, Massachusetts.
Mr. Westerfield, if not Initiative 594, how do we manage to keep guns out of the hands of those who are incapable of controlling their violence?
Thank you. That is the question I've been hoping for. As I mentioned a moment ago, many of the states in this country are way behind, years behind in reporting crime up the system to the federal government. Many states do not do a good job at all of reporting people who are mentally disturbed. If the states were doing a better job of that, if the records were there in the database, then people would not be able to get these guns from any of the sources that have been described, other than this myth we have about gun shows and online.
Mr. Brown.
I think you need to listen very closely to what Mr. Westerfield says. He has no solution for how to keep guns out of the hands of criminals. There's no program, there's no budget. And I think it's important to recognize in regards to something that he said earlier as well, that there is no effect of Initiative 594. Even the proponents of the opposing measure, who were not able to be here or not willing to be here today, said that Initiative 594 will save lives. These are the people who are running the opposing initiative, and they have said that. And so I think it's important to recognize that in states where there is a criminal background check system like this, that have closed the background check loophole, there are 39% fewer deaths by law enforcement officers in the line of duty, and there are 38% fewer times in which people are killed by their intimate partners. And because of the background check system that's in place in those states, they can keep guns out of the hands of criminals.
Reverend Brown, it has been argued that under Initiative 594, one person wouldn't be able to allow a friend to use their gun. Is that your understanding of the initiative? And if so, is that consistent with freedom and individual rights?
That is an unfair description of the initiative, and it's so sad to hear the smokescreens and the distractions that are being put forward by the other side. And here's an example of it. The Seattle Times did an article, a front-page article about transfers in last weekend's paper, and they asked the National Rifle Association and the proponents of the opposing initiative to give one example in any state that has a similar law of somebody that was harmed by the criminal background check system and by closing the gun show loophole, or the background check loophole, and they were unable to find an example. And it should be the case in our political discourse when somebody is going to make a charge about something that they have some evidence for it. And the National Rifle Association itself was not able to come up with any evidence of that kind of problem. And so there's not going to be a limit of our freedom as a result of this.
Mr. Westerfield.
Please repeat the question.
It has been argued that under Initiative 594, one person would not be able to allow a friend to use their gun. Is that consistent with your understanding of the initiative? And if so, is that consistent with freedom and individual rights?
One of the problems I have with the initiative is, and I am a big fan of the initiative process, it allows us periodically to remind the people in Olympia who they work for. The problem with initiatives is they tend to be written in an emotional state. They are intended to take a good idea, and unfortunately, by the time it gets sifted through all the systems and all the additions and all the deletions and all the ramifications, it turns into something completely different. It does not state anywhere in that initiative that I could not loan the gun to my buddy to go duck hunting with. Okay? What it does state is that certain transfers would be exempt, which are the family transfers. You need to all read this thing because I've got it all here. I read it from cover to cover, and you really need to read it because there's way too much in it that I can cover in a minute or even a combination of minutes today. In fact, I invite you to stop by my store and I will give you my paper on this subject.
Mr. Westerfield, what organizations or individuals provide financial support to your position on I-594? And please be specific in your response.
Well, of course, the big bad wolf, the NRA, has donated about $191,000 to the fight. But, of course, the other side has managed to round up $7 million, a significant amount of which comes from outside the state. And the other organizations that are opposing this are grassroots people, guys like myself and others who know that this is a waste of time, it's a sham, and we throw in a buck or two wherever we can.
Reverend?
Well, it's interesting to compare these two initiatives because the opposing initiative has a total of 300 donors, while Initiative 594 has a total of 7,500 donors. So that should give you a sense of the breadth of the support for Initiative 594. And absolutely, there are prominent citizens from the state of Washington and one particular organization from outside of the state of Washington that have made major contributions to Initiative 594. And I'm glad that they and other people have stepped forward. I myself wrote a check for Initiative 594 of $500. It's as much as I could give. But I'll tell you, it's important enough that we should all be giving to Initiative 594 because this is the best hope that we have to close the background check loophole in Washington state and keep guns out of the hands of criminals and dangerous people.
So, Reverend, the inclusion of transfers of firearms as well as sales raises many questions about when a transfer would be exempt from a background check. What is your opinion about how this part of the initiative would be enforced?
I think it's better than taking my opinion would be to take the opinion of law enforcement experts and prosecutors and police chiefs, including the former police chief of Bellingham. And they are in agreement that this does not create a legal problem, that transfers are simply not an issue. And it's been demonstrated over and over again. What we have is a smokescreen that the opposition is trying to put up. They're trying to find little pieces of this bill and turn a molehill into a mountain so that people will be distracted from the one important piece, and that is that this keeps guns out of the hands of people that shouldn't have them. And they recognize that's such a compelling case that they've got to find a distraction or else they're going to lose. And the problem is people want to keep other people safe. And that's why 70% in our polls, 70% of people in Washington state support this background check bill.
Mr. Westerfield.
I continue to wonder how it is that this bill or this initiative is going to stop a criminal from selling a gun out of the trunk of his car to another criminal. This is where criminals get their guns. It has been proven over and over and over again. There is a system called forward trace, When a gun is used in a crime, the agency that confiscates that gun has the option of doing a forward trace. They contact the BATFE, which is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tax, Firearms, and Explosives, and ask them for a forward trace. The BATF then contacts the manufacturer. The manufacturer tells them what distributor they sent it to. The distributor tells them what dealer they sent it to, and the dealer has to confide to the BATFE who they sold the gun to, and the federal government has the option of going to that buyer and finding out what he did with that firearm. This is not where criminals are buying their guns. They are buying them out of the trunks of cars of other criminals.
So, Mr. Westerfield, many injuries and deaths from firearms are attributed to suicide attempts, accidents, and domestic violence. Do you believe the background checks that are required in Initiative 594 would lessen such incidents? Why or why not?
I do not believe that this initiative has any effective means to change any of that. The person who wants to acquire a firearm illegally will do so. What we have to do, as I stated earlier, is to provide and close as many of the doors as we can that are reasonable and rational and effective, which is to make sure that people who have been convicted or convicted of domestic violence have in fact been entered into the database, that every criminal is effectively in the database, and that people who have been adjudicated as being mentally disturbed are in the database so that they cannot make the legal purchase, which leaves them only the illegal purchase, and the illegal purchase will always exist as long as there are people stealing guns. What we need to do is have better record keeping, and we also need to be better at keeping our guns secure. There are some states that are very, very forward in suggesting that people need to have their guns locked up. In the state of Washington...
You got the bell.
Okay.
Reverend.
I agree that this bill is not about suicides. What this is about is keeping guns out of the hands of criminals and the seriously mentally ill. That's the purpose of it. But, you know, I knew who my opponent was going to be today, and so I went and I Googled his name, and I found a great video in which he was teaching gun responsibility. And there is something that he said in the video that I think is important to recognize because I agree with it. In fact, I agree with 100% of what he said in this gun safety video. What he said was, you as a gun owner are responsible that your gun does not fall into the wrong hands. That's why we need Initiative 594. We need it because the informal sales that go online and then end up in the trunks of cars like he is describing, those should have a criminal background check so that it's required that a person that's making that kind of sale would be able to go get a background check, and 10% of those are going to be denied, and those guns should not be in the hands of criminals.
Reverend, Initiative 594 does not provide for funding in the initiative. How will the enforcement of the law be funded?
Enforcement of the law is funded just as the existing criminal background check system is funded. And so it's important to understand what's happening with 594. And what it is that we're taking the existing background check system and we're just requiring that internet gun show purchases and things like that will go through that same system. So the same system is going to be in place. Now, what's interesting to note is that system has succeeded in keeping guns out of the hands of 40,000 criminals and seriously mentally ill people since its inception, and 1,000 people with serious mental illness. And so it's been proven to be a successful system. And all we're doing is funneling these other sales into that system that presently exists.
Mr. Westerfield?
As stated earlier, I have no objections to background checks as they exist. My objection is that 594 will do nothing to change the problem or fix the problem or help the problem. It is a waste of time and energy. It is a waste of money. It is simply another smokescreen for a way to harass and inconvenience to some degree, even may it be a small one, the legitimate gun owner and shooter, and it's simply not going to work. It is simply not going to work.
Mr. Westerfield, mental illness is often cited as a cause of gun violence, especially in the case of mass shooting incidents. Are there measures that you would support to minimize the opportunity for a mentally ill person from acquiring a weapon suited to this purpose?
Thank you. One of the worst shootings we ever had was Virginia Tech. 33 people died. The person who did that shooting was mentally disturbed. It was a record of him being mentally disturbed, but the state of Virginia failed to put that into the database, and therefore he was able to walk into a gun store and buy a gun over the counter. That is part of the problem. We need to think in terms, yes, we have to think in terms of the privacy of the person who is a mental patient, but keep this in mind. When the BATF or the NICS system denies someone at our counter trying to buy a gun, they do not tell us why. It is confidential information. We don't know whether it's a crime that he's committed. We don't know whether he's got a mental problem. We don't know why. We are simply told you cannot issue that firearm, and we do not issue that firearm, and we're required to keep a record of those denials for years in case somebody ever wants to come and look at them again.
Reverend?
Mental health is one of the biggest problems that we face as a society today. And what I would love to hear is from the opponents of Initiative 594 some real solutions to the mental health problems that we face today. We're not hearing that at all. Instead, we're just hearing other arguments about things like harassment and inconvenience and such like that. Well, let me tell you, if you happen to be a victim of gun violence, or if you happen to have a family member who is a victim of gun violence, and that gun came as a result of the background check loophole, then it doesn't seem like much of an inconvenience or much harassment to have required of somebody that was selling that gun. Now, here's something about Washington State. Washington State has one of the top 10 records for reporting mental illness into the background check system. We have demonstrated that we can do this, and we have demonstrated by the virtue of the fact that 1,000 people since its inception who have been severely mentally ill in Washington State have been kept from guns. We've shown that it can work.
Reverend Brown, the full text of the initiative provides exceptions to background checks. What are they, and what is your view about their effect on public safety and on those who already own firearms?
There are a variety of background check exceptions, and an exception, and I won't go through all of them, but one exception is passing of a gun from one family member to another. And what we're trying to do is avoid things that would be an inconvenient or a symbol of harassment to somebody else, and give people the opportunity to pass a gun on to a family member or something like that. And so the point of that is it's difficult for a person to argue that a person who has a criminal background should be free to purchase a gun. That's the key thing about Initiative 594. And we want to stop those kind of transactions that are being discussed here by John. And the way to do that is require all sellers to be certain that the person to whom they are selling is getting a criminal background check. And when we do that, we can reduce the numbers of guns in the hands of criminals.
Mr. Westerfield?
Please, the question again.
The full text of the initiative provides exceptions to background checks.
Thank you. That's all I need. I'm sorry. I happen to agree with that one aspect of the initiative, is it does allow family members to pass guns to immediate family members. There's a couple of things about it that could be a little bit better, but essentially it's okay. I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is the continual reference to how that this will somehow prevent crimes or prevent people who are mentally disturbed in getting firearms, and no one has told me how that will happen, because again, the people who want to get guns illegally get them illegally, and they get them the way I've described 3 times before, from illegal sources.
If initiative, Mr. Westerfield, 594 is imperfect in that it cannot prevent all gun violence, should we be willing to accept an imperfect initiative if it saves one life?
No. This is the argument that people use when they have no argument. If it'll save one life, we should do it. Well, it would save one life if we didn't allow car companies to build cars that go 170 miles an hour. We could save one life if we went back to 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. We could save one life if we asked bicycle riders to wear helmets like motorcycle riders. We can save one life lots of ways. That is a silly argument.
Reverend?
Wow. I am so sorry to hear that. And what makes me sad is that if it's your daughter or your son or your wife or your brother, then that one life means a lot. And you know, you add up the lives and it becomes a significant number of lives. You ask the question, how will this actually stop people from purchasing guns illegally? Well, you know what? There are speeding laws that don't stop all speeders. So does that mean that we should abolish speeding laws? And there are drunk driving laws that don't stop all drunk drivers. Does that mean that we should abolish drunk driving laws? Well, we're not going to be able to stop every single illegal gun purchase, but we can stop some of them. And because we can stop some of them, we have the moral obligation to try.
Reverend, both those in favor and those opposed to Initiative 594 claim support for their position from law enforcement officers. What effect, if any, do you believe that Initiative 594 will have on criminal activity, and what specific evidence do you have that supports your view?
I think I've already answered that. One thing that I said is that criminal background checks in states where they exist, in fact, there are 6 states similar or that have similar laws to 594. Among them are Colorado and Pennsylvania. There are 16 states that have versions of this altogether. We have seen a significant reduction in violent crime. 39% fewer women who are killed by their domestic partners and 38% fewer murders of law enforcement officers. That's a big difference. And if we can save those lives, then we will have made a significant impact when we pass Initiative 594.
And Mr. Brown, Reverend Brown, to work as a licensed firearm dealer in Washington, you need to pass a background check. Should that be true for people who want to buy the guns?
Absolutely, that's what 594 is all about. It's an interesting thing that you have to have a criminal background check if you're going to go read a book in your child or grandchild's elementary school, because they don't let people into the schools without a criminal background check. And so how is it that we allowed this vast marketplace of online sales where there are 40,000 guns that are available today without a criminal background check? How do we, as a society, justify that? And the fact is, we've got to change. We've got to change that so that the same thing that's required in going and reading a book in an elementary school is required of somebody who is going to be buying a gun that could kill someone else.
Mr. Westerfield?
The thing I continually wait to hear but never do hear from the people who are in favor of this initiative is the mechanics. How will it stop someone from getting a gun?
I'm ready to answer that. If there's time, I'm ready to answer it.
Well, somehow this background check law is going to make people suddenly do things differently that they intended to do illegally and immorally and improperly. It's not. Throwing a law at a problem doesn't usually solve it, and in this instance it will not. Yes, we're going to have a law that says background checks. Okay, fine. If I don't get a background check, how did that law affect anything?
Mr. Westerfield, the last question will be yours to answer first. That's a lot of... in your view, what aspects of the values and culture of the people of our state are reflected in your opposition to this initiative?
That's a complicated question. It's going to be hard to do it in a minute. I was born and raised in this state. I served in the United States Army from this state. I was a police officer in this state for 15 years, I should point out. I love this state and I love the people here. The culture of this state is fantastic. However, there is a criminal element here, and nothing we pass in the way of legislation or initiatives like this are going to change that. I am in favor of gun background checks as they exist now. I am not in favor of 594. There's a better way to do it, and I've already spoken about that, which is, of course, to improve the reporting system and also to ask a greater level of responsibility of gun owners to keep their guns locked up, and a greater responsibility of people to identify people in their community who have mental problems and make sure somebody knows about it. I get so angry when I hear about one of these mass shootings and all the neighbors say, yeah, we knew he was crazy. Well, why wasn't it reported?
Reverend Brown? And this will be rephrased to say, in your view, what aspects of the values and culture of the people of our state are reflected in your support for this initiative?
I think people in Washington State care about their neighbor. I think they care about what happens to the person that lives next door. And because they care, they want to be certain that a gun doesn't fall into the hands of a criminal or somebody with severe mental illness that could harm their neighbor. That's a value of people in Washington State. John asked the question, how's this going to happen? Well, let me show you how it's going to happen. When John gets up and gives a gun safety education class and he says the words as he did, that it's your responsibility that a gun doesn't fall into the hands of a criminal, then he's going to say, the gun that you own at home, before you sell that gun, you are required to get a criminal background check from the purchaser. So take it to my store or any store that sells guns in Washington State and get that criminal background check so that you, as a gun owner and gun seller, can know that what I believe, that guns should not fall into the hands of criminals and unsafe people, that it indeed happens. John is going to be the one to help us make it work.
And Mr. Westerfield, it's time for your 1-minute closing statement.
Well, once again, I do appreciate the time to be here. I had a little misunderstanding about how this was going to happen today. I wasn't quite as aware as I should have been about the time constraints. So I've had to really abbreviate my comments. As I mentioned earlier, you're all invited to stop by the store next week. I work at Yeager's, by the way, for those of you who don't know that. And I would be happy to give you a complete paper on all of my comments and all my understanding of this initiative. The good news is, as I've said repeatedly, I'm not against background checks. I'm against this initiative because it's ineffective and it's being put forward with misconception and sham.
Reverend Brown.
I just want to speak again for Monique Williams and all the Monique Williams of the past and the present and future, whose assailants have come with a gun that was purchased because they were able to evade the background check system. It's time for us in Washington State to do something about the background check loophole. And the best way that we can keep guns out of the hands of criminals and the seriously mentally ill is to make sure that when one person is selling a gun to somebody else, that the background check is required. And we can do that with a minimum of fuss and a minimum of hassle while respecting people's Second Amendment rights. And because we can do it, and because our opposition even admits that it will save lives, it's important for us to do it. And so I encourage you to vote on behalf of Initiative 594 in this year's election.
Well, the League would like to thank both of you and all of our speakers today, and I'd ask you to join with me in thanking them for coming.
I would like to add my thanks to all of you for your speakers to present information to us and speak for the League to say we hope that those of you who are present today or those of you who are watching this on a rerun edition of the program feel that you've learned more about the initiatives and about the PUD candidates so that you'll be informed when it's time to mark your ballot in November. I also want to thank those of you in the audience for your excellent and thoughtful questions. You helped make this successful today. And I thank our League volunteers, especially Joe Collins, who headed the committee as our voter service chair to make all of this happen. One more thing, I'd like to remind you of the discussion we had a couple of hours ago about the Charter Review Commission candidates. Those candidates who were able to come today will be outside of the City Hall, and it's your opportunity to meet them and ask any questions that you might like to ask. We have 2 more forums that we will be presenting to the public. Those are on October 8th and October 23rd. Please note they are not here. They are in the Bellingham Municipal Court building. On October 8th, Wednesday evening, our agenda will be the candidates for the U.S. House of Representatives, District 1 and 2, and the Washington State Senate District 42 candidates. On October 23rd, Thursday evening, our agenda will be the representatives for the State House of Representatives for 40th and the 42nd District. So again, thank you for being here today. And remember to vote in November. Oh, join the league, my colleague says.